Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about ethics and anthropological filmmaking. This is a very interesting one because ethics is something which is associated with our life. We all do follow ethics in various aspects and various forms. Now, before we go into the details of it, let us see what is ethics. Ethics seeks to resolve questions of human morality by defining concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, virtue and vice, justice and crime. As a field of intellectual enquiry, moral philosophy is related to the fields of moral psychology, descriptive ethics, and value theory. Ethics are something which help our society to run smoothly. Ethics are directive principles which guide our life. Ethics have derived from the culture, from the society. We can also say that the ethics are the basic values which we learn from our surroundings. The ethics of the making of a film are manifested in various ways in the film's aesthetics. Most viewers sense the filmmaker's attitude towards their subject, be it contempt or respect, compassion or cynicism, arrogance or humility. Even a documentary reveals qualities of its maker as well as its subject. The way subjects are framed, the shots they were juxtaposed to the images, their voices are laid over, how long they are allowed to talk, and what about the revelation of a camera pan or tilt, whether the style disguises or discloses the filmmaker's authorial presence. In all these ways, an audience pieces together clues about the filmmaker's intellectual and behavioral point of view. A film is basically a reflection of filmmaker's thought. So the filmmaker needs to be very ethical when they're making a film. Especially in case of anthropological filmmaking, they have to be very ethical because they are talking about real life cases. If they are not ethical with their subject, then the people will have a complete wrong information about the lives. J. Ruby, a very eminent person, in his discussion of ethics in ethnographic filmmaking, lists as to be referred which are the moral issues. He said he actually listed three things which are very important and must be followed for ethnographic filmmaking. The first one, the image maker's personal moral contact to produce an image that is somehow a true reflection of the intention in making the image in the first place. He should be very concerned about that. The moral obligation of the producer to his or her subject must be considered. The moral obligation of the producer to his or her intended audience must also need to be considered. A thorough understanding of this course reveals that this field of social science is a complex one, as it includes various modes, styles, and genres, but there exist some ethical ideas that should be followed but cannot be imposed like rules. There is another very important person called Winston who argues that because the issues of ethics in documentary has more to do with the treatment of subject in the film than with the media responsibilities to audiences, documentaries should be allowed to make their best judgment. Most documentaries already know where to draw the line in terms of artistic license. You cannot take license just to violate ethics. Winston contends that the healthiest position for any reader of or member of audience for mass communication messages is an informed, sustained, and profound skepticism. A skepticism that should be cultivated but not formally regulated. So, ethics is like that. And when a filmmaker is making a film, he has to be very, very careful about it. Everything cannot be violated in the name of artistic freedom. Despite the fact that scholars such as Ruby and Winston have written many authoritative works on the subject, it appears that discourse about ethics in documentaries is largely based on faith. faith or a conviction that whatever will be presented in the documentary will be fair and reasonably accurate account of events. A belief that the participants' filmed subjects are well informed and understand what they are consenting to willing, and a trust in the law and that it will be protected from individual from any sort of defamation, damage and misrepresentation. So, in anthropological filmmaking, when a filmmaker is actually recording the life of a subject, it is very important that the subject must also know where it's going to be presented, how it's going to be presented. He should not be misguided. He should be able to understand that whatever he is saying and doing in front of camera, how it is going to be used and represented. But many a time the filmmakers, they are not doing that, which is unethical. So we should always think about ethics when we are making ethnographic film. These ethnographical films continue to act as content that are further analyzed by researchers. There are, however, certain ethics that need to be followed by. This essentially revolve around the relationship between the filmmaker, camera, and the film subject. However, before one delves into these complexities, one should understand the underlying themes that contribute to the broader field of ethical issues. Contemporary debates in the field of ethnographic film theory by media theorists highlight these sub-themes of objectivity, subjectivity, realism, and representational ethics. There is always a debate that arises how much subjectivity and how much objectivity should be maintained in documentary filmmaking. However, in anthropological filmmaking, it is expected that the filmmakers should follow the objective line when they are recording their subjects' life and when they are representing them. Garnet C. Bouchard, in one of his papers on ethics and documentary, A Real and Actual Truth, identified the ethical problems are mostly all related to our ideas about truth. He explained that the ethics, when and if questioned, are related to the objective concerns regarding the truth of the documentary. If anything is true about documentary, it is the role played by vision as a mediate between the real and reality. The camera thus unfolds before us the reality as perceived by the filmmaker. This is some might hinder the right of the audience to know the whole truth. He actually wanted to say that the concept of truth in itself is very subjective. What we see in anthropological film is basically the truth that the producer himself has absorbed. So, when we are absorbing it, we are absorbing not as a whole truth, but we are absorbing it as the truth showed by the filmmaker. So, here lies a problem, here lies a question which we should always think about. Bouchard thus explains that in the context of documentary, truth is typically defined as something in the realm of opinion which cannot be fully accessed, something about which audience have a right to know whether or not they ever will, and something on account of which participants may be taken advantage, whether they realize it now or they will be realizing it later. Thus, when the idea of truth is combined with the idea that audiences have rights to know the truth and that participants have rights also to know how they are going to be represented, then documentarians become agents privileged in their own right of free expression. So the documentarian basically stands in between the audience and the subject. So both the audience and the subjects are supposed to know the truth, but how much they actually come to know, that is a question. Along with the truth comes the factor of authenticity of the incident that we, the audience, observe in the film or documentary. One has to come to a prior understanding that anthropological films are a reflection or representation of facts that the audience might not have encountered themselves but are familiar with. Thus, documentaries by definition must be non-fiction. Commentary and opinions are allowed, but misrepresentation is not. Many a times it happens that we come to know about a culture or about an area or about a country or a region just by seeing this anthropological film. Whatever will be represented in these films, we have to accept it as a truth. So it is also the responsibility of the filmmakers to give us the true facts. Because if they are not showing us the true facts, then the people will accept it and absorb it as a truth, which can be a problem later on. As debates continues to exist regarding these beliefs, Landsman argues in one of his papers that today authenticity has emerged as a component in the new aesthetic grounds formed by cultivating a style of constructed realism. It is the style in which the film has been recorded, which dictates the content of the film, which is rather an unscrupulous manner. He further argues that the documentary aspect today become less of a clear genre indicator and more of an aesthetic strategy, though which a filmmaker can choose to indicate familiar notions of authenticity. Many a time the filmmakers debate that there has to have some kind of artistic freedom, artistic liberty. So they can, whatever they are seeing, every time it is not possible to record on the camera. So by using this artistic freedom, they want to show certain things which are subjective in nature. But then one have to realize that whenever, even if you are using the artistic freedom, you have to keep it to the true incidents. You just cannot exaggerate it, because then that will be unethical and wrong both for the audience and also for the people on whom the film was made. Thus, all of these three underlying themes contribute to the broader umbrella of ethics. Now, all this together contribute to an ethical behavior. Before we can discuss the challenges that a documentary filmmaker faces while producing the film that can be considered ethical, we must try to understand what is an ethical behavior. Ethical behavior actually means what you are seeing, whatever is truth, whatever is in front of your eyes, you must showcase that without harming anybody. This harm is not only physical but also psychological. You are not supposed to use any words which can defame a person or a situation. You should not claim anything until and unless you have proper proof in your hand. So everything that you are saying needs to be authentic and well documented. Unless it is documented, unless it is well authentic, if anyone challenges you, you might be in a big trouble. The artistic freedom doesn't mean that you can show whatever you want to show about a person or about a situation. You are not supposed to show your belief, rather, you are supposed to show the reality. This is one dilemma which always stays in the mind of the filmmakers. But when you are making a non-fiction anthropological film, you have to be very, very clear that whatever is the reality, that you need to show. And this you are showing to the people, you are showing to the world. This knowledge must also be there among the subject on whose life you are going to make this. Cultural relativists contend that ethics and morals are not absolute. Hence, to define them within the discipline of anthropology will be a difficult task. If viewed in this manner, there is no certainly a code of a moral set of ethics that the filmmakers is supposed to follow. In fact, it is very, very difficult to follow one. It particularly depends on the specific time, place, and manner to consider when the film is being made. Filmmakers must also recognize that not only their own ethical principles that matter. While making a film, it involves also the participants' ethical belief and considerations. It also involves the audience belief and consideration. So the filmmakers need to think about the social boundaries that they should follow. There is one association which is called American Anthropological Association. They asked the anthropologist while conducting a research to follow certain guidelines so that every individual involved with the project is respected and given their due importance. Since the anthropologist's quest for knowledge involves inquiry into the lives of the people, it is the responsibility of the researcher to foster and respect all people involved in the project. Researchers, prior to conducting the study, must inform about the purpose, potential impacts, and sources of support for research projects. With the people being studied, funders, colleagues, as well as provide information and other relevant details to parties who are important to study. It is always better to seek prior information and permission from the people on whom the film is being made. They should be aware about why they are projected and how their life is going to be projected. There is one more association called National Association for the Practice of Anthropology, which is known as NAPA. On the contrary, believes that ethics are certain principles that can guide a researcher, not rules that can be enforced. It contends that ethics is dependent on the specific time and purpose of the film being made. There cannot be a certain body of regulations that can be applied to all situations. Even though organizations like AAA and NAPA try to lay down a set of ideas that can be considered as ethical regulations, it is not possible for the filmmakers to rely on any code, because you have to understand, when you are making a film, specifically anthropological film, that means you are going to various places, areas, you are meeting different people, and different people have different concern. So following similar kind of code to maintain the ethics is definitely difficult. So it is better to follow a certain amount of decorum while doing the filmmaking so that nobody's honor is hurt in this entire process. Each situation actually comes with its own set of dilemmas that must be dealt accordingly. Thus, the filmmaker's job is to evaluate all of the different ethical regulations imposed on the project and try to act as ethically as possible in the given situation. Visual anthropologist believes that ethnographers should try to figure out how research and ethics should intersect the ethical codes, as ethics in ethnography is based on making decisions as per the interpretations of morality and intentions of other people, and it also should represent the institutions. So it is very important that there can be some broad guidelines can be given to them, but there cannot be any exact code imposed on the filmmakers, which will be very difficult for them to follow. So the main ethical concern that arises from the above discussion is that the intention of the filmmaker. This is very important. Why are you making the film? Are you making the film only for the sake of money? You want to earn name and fame with this? Then you have to be very careful, because anthropological films are not only made to earn name and fame, but they are also made so that people comes to know about various areas, people, their life, their suffering, their happiness, their cultures. Relationship between the filmmaker and its subject is very important, so that the filmmaker should not get biased when they're recording certain activities. Responsibilities of the filmmaker, that is the most important part, the most crucial part. The filmmaker himself or herself need to be very responsible. How the filmmaker is going to present his or her work positions the subject and how they are going to reflect it. So all these things need to be considered properly. Ethical codes that need to be considered while making an anthropological film are endless, and the moral dilemmas that the ethnographer is faced with is almost crippling. This, however, does not outweigh the numerous positive impacts that an anthropological film has. Like the filmmaker should be given artistic freedom to portray or tell their story, in a manner that best suits its intention. One should not forget that with great power comes great responsibility to act wisely as it impacts the life of the subject represented and also the society at large. Now, we are in the digital era. So, in the digital era, it is more difficult to follow ethics because you are being watched 24 into 7 and different people are using different devices to control you and also to monitor you. So, with digitization in this century, social media has provided a big voice to the ethnic groups so that they can come together and be a part of the broader community, which was missing previously. At the same time, this platform of media lacks a certain gatekeepers. Digital ethnographers often, in the quest to shed light on marginalized groups, violate the ethical norms of consent and how they are represented online. Despite the fact that it adds to new insights and understanding, the digital ethnographer might unknowingly as well call for unwanted attention and propose challenges to the subject that they represent, which actually become very dangerous because, as we know, when it is coming to social media, there are no gatekeepers, there are no filters. So you can actually show anything that you want, but you have to be responsible before showing. Your over enthusiasm should not harm anyone's dignity. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, they don't have a proper set of ethical codes. They are not having any proper guidance as well. So, ethnographers themselves need to be very careful about all these things. They should not end up misrepresenting or risking anyone's life or culture. Thus, it is important that not only visual anthropologists and field researchers follow an ethical conduct while doing their work, but also the digital ethnographers as well practice reflexive, ethical, and correct representation at their work front. At the end, we all have to remember that it is a proper ethics that actually bind the society properly. If we are not following them, then we are going to harm the society at large. When we are going to show something, we have to be very, very careful that no one's interest gets harmed, nobody feel defamed, and nobody should feel ashamed. So, when you are taking the responsibility of doing ethnographic filmmaking, you also have to be an ethical ethnographic film researcher as well as a good anthropological filmmaker.